So then, out of college, then did you go into the United Nations right after that, or?
I did. I was in New York going to college, and that's where the main United Nations Secretariat building is, or offices are. So when I was in college, I actually went through an internship. So I was, like I said, I was like the oldest one in my classes. I was 24, everybody else was 18. And I had this teacher who came in late, and all of her stuff was all over the place. And she's like, can one of you students please, make copies for me? And everybody was so young and shy. And I was like a bartender at night. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do it, whatever. And just by kind of standing out to her, she got this internship opportunity that came from the UN. And she kind of gave it to me first because I guess, I helped her out in a situation. So it was through that internship, and I interned for, I think, 6 months. And then I got a job. I was really lucky just to get a job right after that internship.
Wow, so all because of Xerox copies?
All because, yes. My poor teacher came in late. I mean, her papers were everywhere, and she was really just like, can somebody make some copies? And all these younger kids, they still have braces. And I was just like, I'll do it,
You know what's funny is that when my wife was a teacher, that's the one thing that she'd be like, I got to go and make some copies. And I would always make fun of her. I'd be like, copies? Like, how hard is to make copies,
Yeah, right.
So I'd always like mess with her about that. But
so
you saying that like makes me think of that scenario. Yeah, I know, Keen. Yeah, trust me, I got reprimanded. But yeah, it's all about the copies. So I could see that. So basically, they saw you as a go-getter. They're like, all right, well, this is somebody who may not disappoint me, so I'll take a chance.
Yeah. And I worked hard for that chance. You work 9 to 5 for free, for almost 6 months, and people can see what you're capable of. And so, yeah, there's so many different divisions and offices, and the UN covers, a lot of different work. So it was just a matter of finding kind of the right area that I wanted to work in. So I applied to this division called Africa Division 1, and they were working on the Sudan and the referendum for South Sudan at the time. And I thought it was really interesting work. So I was really, that first job, I was, really the director's personal assistant. And she was like a pretty brutal woman. People were pretty surprised, that I could handle her for so long. But, that's just the way it was. And then I really wanted to get, the field work. But the UN has a very complicated hiring system. And so, you go in at a certain level, and it's really hard to make that next level up. You kind of have to break out of the system at the level you're in. And it's hard to explain, but basically I started at like the lower level, G level, they call it. And to get to the higher level, the P level, I would basically have to kind of like come back in as a P level. You can't really jump levels. It's a very complicated system that they have. Anyways, so I started that work in New York. And at the time, the office was working with all the different, heads of states or presidents or foreign ministers around the world to really get the Sudan, which was one of the largest countries in Africa at the time, to basically split into another nation. So there would be a new country, South Sudan, and that country would be run under more of a democracy. And so going through that whole process with that office and doing that at that New York level, was really cool. And I, of course, wanted to go to South Sudan after, working on that job for 2 years. So I went. Yeah, it took me a while to get recruited, but I got recruited. And the scope of my work, my title was communications officer. And so that really was kind of almost like being a little bit of a journalist for the UN, and then being able to work in a lot of different multimedia. So we had a radio station, we had a TV and film and video station, we had a spokesperson that, was always giving interviews to a lot of different media. So that's kind of what I went out there to do.
So you were just in charge of kind of hitting every network as far as communicating what's going on with you guys, like a PIO? Is that like another way that people call that position? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Public Information Office.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we at the time, so that was a big part of what we did was, you know, informing all the different media around the world, and also within our agency, all the different reporting kind of came to us, and we had to kind of analyze it or get it available to the public, like our human rights report every year that came out. And so kind of even proofreading that, and then making sure that the mass public can read something like that. So yeah, that's what kind of the bulk of it is, getting really important information disseminated for the UN.
How long were you over there?
You got,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Corey.
You said you got recruited by, who did you get recruited by to go there? You were still with the UN?
Yes. So the UN, they have what they call peacekeeping missions, and they have, you know, a lot around the world. And these peacekeeping missions kind of, you know, go into countries that are in conflict or crisis. And at this time, they were going into South Sudan more as kind of like establishing some government and peace building, and really kind of working on this new democracy that they were putting in place. So it was basically through the peacekeeping mission where I got my job, and then I went out there.
Okay. So was that the next step up for you then? Was that the P level, or was that still G level for you?
No, I wasn't. That's a good question. I actually went out there at the UN volunteer level. So I left my cushy job in New York, and I even went to Rome for the last bit of my time in that job. And then I totally took a pay cut, went out basically as a UN volunteer, worked my butt off. They still paid us, you know, a little bit. But then I worked for about a year, and then I got the P level finally. Yes.
Oh, so you actually took a step down before you could go up then?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Is that by design?
It's really, it was by my design, because there were only so many options to breaking through that barrier of moving up. And for me, that was, you know, going at the UNB level, getting that professional experience that they were really looking for. And then, yeah. So, you know, a lot of people have a hard time breaking that system, but that was kind of the best way that I could figure out how to do it.
No.
It worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
So yeah, no matter how you slice it, whether it was right or wrong, it worked, and that's leads me to believe that it was the right way to do it.